Joe, since you are right there on my, or first on my left, why don't we start with you and we'll start to, we'll start to have a discussion about your question or questions.
Using this with larger groups, so with a whole of organisation, up to about sort of 3,000.
But in terms of doing it across a big organisation and getting buy-in, I think in the online masterclass, I touched on it briefly, but probably not in massive detail. But at the end of last year, I started a project with 500 people across Australia and New Zealand. So 3 business units within a group business, I guess. It's not the warehouse, but I'll just use that as the warehouse group has warehouse, stationery, Briscoes, etc. Right? A similar brand architecture to that. And I brought the slides up because I thought I might show you just quickly what. I thought I might quickly take you through this, just to give you a feel of how I approached this with a 500-person company across 2 countries, 3 business units, and I taught the leadership team how to go through this, and I coached them through it, so to speak. And they ended up running 26 workshops, I think it was, across Australia and New Zealand. This was a manufacturing company. And how we worked this project was that we started with the leadership team. So the leadership team of the group, so of all 3 businesses. And through that, we did the Map Your Emotional Culture workshop, but with a leadership twist on it. So talking about what we wanted our people to feel and not feel. And this was the top 6 the leadership team came up with, and the top 5, they came up with what we don't want our people to feel, but they might. So we did that as a standalone thing over, I think that might have been a day and a half, plus going through the canvas and all that. And then what we did is, well, part of that session was me teaching the leaders how to then go run those workshops. And so they went out into their 3 business units, so the entire group, and ran those 26 workshops. And I just ran a really rudimentary data collection system on the back end of those workshops. And we found out what the most common feelings were that were coming up. So 18 out of the 26 times supported came up, 13 confident came up, and proud, open-minded, connected, inspired came up in a quarter of the sessions. And then on the inverse side of that, overwhelmed, disheartened, uncertain, uncomfortable, impatient. These are the most common ones that came up, which is a really interesting piece of feedback for the leadership team, right? Because they're going, wow, okay, this is what our teams are telling us. And then this was we'd also broke it down by business unit. And so there were some similar ones across business unit as well, which was really interesting. And then for undesired, there were 3 common ones across business units as well, which was nice to see the alignment. And so then what we ended up doing was then taking all of that. This is very much a traditional top-down way of doing this, by the way. This is what the team wanted to do. And so we started with leadership team. We then went to the staff and said, what do you think? And we ran all those 26 individual workshops. These were run within the business units, cross-functional teams. And then what I ended up doing, based on what that came out of, my suggestion was for us to then take the top 3 from the leadership team and then combine that with the top 3 most common across the rest of the entire group. So then there was a combination of it not just being about, hey, we've gone away and come back to you with the top 6 most common. The story that the leadership team were then telling their people was that these are the 3 that we really would ideally want you to be feeling and not feeling, but we know you might be. And then this is what you've told us overall. And so we ended up coming up with a list of 6 for each. But I wanted to show you this to give you a sense of how I've done it previously with a big organization. Funnily enough, this approach, the top-down approach, is far more comfortable for that senior leadership team because they're used to working in that manner, which I understood via diving into why that happened with the HR person later, about why they did it with cross-functional teams, because that's how they're used to doing it. Although I think the counterintuitive approach, breaking it into functional teams, is far more powerful from an engagement perspective. And then we then put the onus and the responsibility on the team leader to really take charge of the emotional culture of their individual team. So then we're moving away the responsibility for an HR to come in and say, hey, this is what we said it should be. How's it going? It's, hey, you did this with your team. You came up with it together. Now, how are you tracking against that? We then have to design ways to connect that back to the overall. that just becomes the next challenge. How does that connect to an overarching belief system or value set? Which I think is a really simple step. Part 2 of this project was them going away and running the Map Your Emotional Culture canvas with each of those teams. Except they decided, based on our slight miscommunication, they then went back into functional teams and did the canvases in functional teams. So part 1 was cross-functional teams. Part 2 was going back into their functional teams to go, hey, with a leader in each of those workshops, hey, this is what we've come up with, and this is what the organization has said. Now let's explore the behaviors, desired and undesired behaviors that are going to reinforce that. So that was part 2 of the project. So we started with defining and mapping the emotional culture for the whole of the organization, and then having a discussion around desired, undesired behaviors that are going to reinforce that. So that was our 1-2 step approach to that. I've seen a lot. I've come from the design, which you would have seen in the masterclass, but I've come from a design agency world where we specialize in helping companies with this one-way communication sort of thing. We've come up with these values and how do we broadcast them and tell stories. And we created really amazing initiatives to go, what is the bright spot story where somebody's lived the value and then we share that story with everybody. But it always came back to a communications exercise. And some of the things that we design or companies naturally fall back on designing is how do we just broadcast these things? So how do we tell people that somebody's doing something cool over there, which is important, but if that's the only thing that happens, it simply just remains it just simply remains another broadcast channel. And where I think where I've seen it being really, really, really powerful is why I keep coming back to this functional team thing is going, if the finance team has their list of top 5 for each, and on a monthly basis, they're focusing on one of those on their top 5. So let's say over a 6-month period, they focus on inspired the first month and what they can do to feel more inspired. And then they do a start, stop, continue type discussion. And then month 2, they then focus on the next one. We have these moments of ongoing engagement, ongoing discussion around emotions in the workplace and our team. That is true engagement for me. That's micro moments of these discussions that we can then also complement with that broadcasting of the best stories from across the organization. But if it's only ever this broadcast, that means that we're just telling people stuff rather than helping them experience it themselves on a more micro moment basis. It's really important to have that, but without the micro moments of stuff within a team that is meaningful to them, it just becomes, oh, that's that thing from HR, that's that thing from the head office. They're telling us stuff, and it can I've seen it, and I know it does quite quickly dial up, especially in government agencies, dial up the cynicism levels a lot. Yeah. And I'm really trying hard to dial down the cynicism, and I've seen the cynicism drop when we have meaningful conversations at a team level rather than just purely the top-down broadcast stuff. And I'll share this. Some of you will have seen this if you're in the Slack group, but I'll share this with you as well. And this is just a quick example of how it can work over a 12-month period. And so this is actually inspired by a government agency who's got 3 teams, and 2 of them are running a really similar process to this. Where in the first month, they run the Map Your Emotional Culture workshop, so the one you've learned in the masterclass, and at a functional team level, come up with their top 5 of each. And then months 2 to 6, they have a monthly session. We call it a check-in or critical focus, where each month the team focuses on one of the top 5. And you get the team to pick that. So there's autonomy in that as well. So the team can decide, let's focus on at ease this month. How can we feel more at ease as a team? And you get the team to come up with a whole bunch of rituals for that month, and you run those rituals in that month. And at the end of the month, you review that, what worked, what didn't work, and then you pick another emotion, another feeling, and you just keep cycling through till you've done your top 5. And then you reevaluate, do the Map Your Emotional Culture workshop again, and go, how's it changed? Because I've worked with organizations over 2 years now where every 6 months it's changed slightly based on where how the team's evolved and the leadership's evolved and the organization's evolved. And do it again. And then over a 12-month period, you've had 12, 13, 14 conversations, micro conversations as a team about emotions in our workplace, and you're connecting people, you're nudging vulnerability. This here for me is far more powerful than just purely sharing the stories cross-functionally across the organization about how that team over there is doing some cool stuff. That's important, but if that only happens and we miss this part, then I don't think the collaboration piece or the broadcasting bit works. So it's important to have both these things, I think. Yeah. Start with then in terms of as you start to formulate a plan about how it could then roll out is this is very much based on a guerrilla marketing type approach where we do lots of small things, but we find the 1 or 2 leaders, or you can find the 1 or 2 team leaders who really love this and get it intuitively and trial it with them first. And so what then happens is they do it, and then you're able to then to share those stories with some other team leaders, or they start to then wonder what's going on, or they start hearing about it. So starting small with a couple of leaders and testing it, because also that approach might not work for your organization or your teams. And rather than rolling out this perfect templated company-wide plan, you can test it at a small level with 1 or 2 teams, and then based on actual feedback, real-time feedback from staff, you then build a better case to then take it to other team leaders. First idea of these micro moments, which I touched on briefly, especially around values. So if you have a set of core generic values, how do you create as many micro moments as possible to talk about those values? And I did this is a long time ago now, I did a project with a car rental company here in New Zealand where we actually designed a card game for their values. And go the extra mile might have been one of the, just from memory, something like that. I can't remember the exact term that the copywriter came up with, something like that. And so we had a card that had go the extra mile on it. And on the back of it, we had 3 questions that said, where have you seen somebody go the extra mile? Where have you gone the extra mile? And what's the one way that we could go an extra mile as a team? Just 3 really simple questions, right? And the team leader got those cards out and played those cards on a monthly basis with their team. You can see you know that I'm obsessed with card games. But those micro moments, that monthly micro moment of conversations was really important, because the staff could then pick which one they wanted to play, which one they wanted to talk about. And that created the story sharing, the micro moments of talking about it. Whereas normally it's just really cool videos that get sent down from HR or head office. And it's just, we're just telling people stuff again, rather than people supporting, creating the answers. So yeah, micro moments is a really important thing. I know when we're in these positions, leadership positions, we're like, what's the most grandiose big thing we can do that's going to tick as many boxes as possible? And I'm like, what if we reverse that and go, what's the smallest thing we can do the most often that might have an even bigger impact? And so it's like, it's just reframing how we're looking at what we're doing.